Thank you for watching. Alright, here's another video about religious liberty, things I should have said in the other videos. In case I wasn't clear enough, it is very sad if people need to hide their religion. Any culture or society that, threatens people if their religion is known, is a bad society, and maybe they've got other things good about their society, and there's more than one thing that happens in the society, but it's definitely sad if there's a place where people need to be quiet about what they believe about God. Unless they need to be quiet because they believe God wants them to kill, rob, rape, and force others to worship in their way. Just in case it wasn't clear, it's not a violation of a person's religious freedom if they're not allowed to force that religion on others, including the death penalty for apostasy. You really have a sad and pathetic religion if you have to force people to stay in it by killing them as punishment for leaving. My religion, we don't do that because we've got good reasons for people to join our church, and we don't need to threaten to kill people to keep them with us. And if they decide to leave, that's between them and God. They're not a threat to me because they leave my religion, so there's nothing to defend myself from. There's absolutely no reason to get violent against an apostate. But I've heard of religions that give the death penalty for apostasy. If that religion is being misinterpreted, there are people who believe that they should give the death penalty for apostasy. And it definitely wrong for them to do that. They have no right to claim religious freedom to do that. In fact, it's a good idea if we punish them as harshly as can be done. Maybe execute them if we catch them planning on doing that, or attempting to kill somebody for apostasy. Okay, now, the United States Constitution, when people talk about that, sometimes they use the phrase wall of separation. Those words are nowhere in the Constitution. Is it legitimate to use those words? Maybe. To some degree, you could interpret there being a metaphorical wall between the church and the state in the Constitution. Now, where this phrase comes from is a letter that President Thomas Jefferson wrote. People had contacted him who were worried their religious freedoms would be violated, that they would not be able to worship God the way they saw fit. And Thomas Jefferson's response to them included the words, wall of separation. He was assuring them that the wall of separation would still be there to protect them. Now, it's important to understand the meaning of the Constitution, especially that part of it. It's important to ask yourself this question. The first person I remember hearing ask this question is Glenn Beck, so let's not plagiarize this question there now, you know where I heard it from. Who or what is the wall protecting? That's a serious question. You see, walls are usually put up to keep things from going one way. They're not usually put up to keep things from going both ways. For example, the walls, we can count an enclosed fence as a wall around the tigers and lions and bears at the zoo and the elephants. The elephants won't try to eat me, but the more dangerous animals at the zoo, whether they're dangerous because they would eat people or dangerous because they might get grumpy or because they could accidentally crush people. Whatever the reason, the animal's dangerous at the zoo. The walls are there to protect us from the animals at the zoo, to keep them in. See, the walls aren't there to go both ways. They're protecting one thing. Or at least they're more so intended to protect one thing. Prison walls are there more so to protect us outside of the prison from the dangerous people who have proven they belong in prison. You see, the wall is not just there for decoration or there for things going both ways. There's something that's a threat and something that isn't a threat. I guess the walls, once the wall is up, it could stop things from going both ways. But usually walls are up not because there's mutual threats, but there's a threat going one way, not the other. Prison walls, I guess there are a handful of people who would go vigilante on their relative's killer if there wasn't a prison wall, but yeah, that's a lot less likely than dangerous murder, rapist, drug pusher, getting out of prison and doing more organized crime, gang leader, getting out and doing stuff. So, when we're talking about the First Amendment to the Constitution, we're talking about religion, because those two clauses are about religion. And the government, it names Congress because Congress is where the power in the government is. Nobody else in the government, if the Constitution is followed, can write a law. And so, if there's no law written prohibiting religion, interfering with the free exercise, then the president can't touch those things if the president is obeying his constitutional limits. And same for judges. So we've got government, religion. Which one were the founding fathers worried about? Which one did they think was dangerous? Which one needed protection from which? Of course, religion is the thing being protected by that metaphorical wall from the government. Now, why does that matter? That matters because it's okay, it's not a violation of the principle of religious freedom, if the general religious understanding of things has some influence on the government. Alright? That's why. So a law is not unconstitutional just because somebody who liked it has a religion that teaches that thing is a sin. Automatically. It should not automatically be assumed that person is forcing their religion on us if they vote for brain-killing drugs to be illegal. And their religion teaches them to not kill their brains with stupid drugs. Okay, now, a little more history about the Constitution. At the time the Constitution was ratified for several decades, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights was interpreted and understood to only apply to the federal government, not to the states. The states could do those things, restrict religion, interfere with the free exercise thereof. Now, there were probably a lot of people, I don't know what percentage, but there were people who were not worried about the states becoming tyrannical. So they didn't think that the Constitution, that part of it applied to the states because they thought the states wouldn't do it. At least that's the way some people might have thought. And so, when people in New York, Ohio, Missouri, and Illinois were persecuting members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and literally killing a few of us and raping some of us and beating a lot of us and stealing our property, and sometimes the government was involved in that, especially in Missouri, they were not violating the Constitution because at that time the Bill of Rights was interpreted and understood to only apply to the federal government and not the states. They were in violation of the general principle of freedom of religion and being a civilized human being and peacefully coexisting with somebody else who wants to peacefully coexist with you. And the same could be said about people at that time period who were doing similar things to Jews and to Catholics and any other religious group that was not trying to take over the world like Pinky and the Brain, but was being attacked. On a tangent here, but it's a tangent that touches the circle, it's related. In the 1840s, when the City Council of Nauvoo, Illinois, destroyed the Nauvoo Expositor as punishment for that newspaper lying. That newspaper was spreading lies. It was not just spreading news and information. The freedom of the press, which is listed in the Constitution, was not violated because of that interpretation. We were talking about the City Council destroying a lying newspaper, spreading lies about a group that had already been chased out of other states. But it was a city government. That constitutional right, freedom of the press, was interpreted to apply to the federal government, and thus at that time that action would have not been and was not interpreted to be a violation of the Constitution. I've got mixed feelings and opinions about how wrong it was that Joseph Smith had the Nauvoo Expositor destroyed. It was spreading lies about him. But maybe they went too far. But this video is, let's get back to freedom of religion and not freedom of the press. Alright, so then we had the Civil War. And what triggered the Civil War? The first ever Republican president to the United States of America, Abraham Lincoln, won the election. What was the one issue that the Republican Party was founded on? Anti-slavery, end slavery. And some were not going to put up with that and left. And then we had 4 years of 4 years of very bloody war. It was hundreds of thousands of people that died. As a percentage of the population, that would have been equivalent to millions of people die if we had a comparable percentage die in something now. And at the end of the Civil War, there were some new constitutional amendments. One of them banned slavery. That was the 13th, if I'm remembering right. There were like 2 or 3 real close together related to issues about the Civil War and misbehavior of the South at the end of the Civil War. The Democrats in the South lost the Civil War and did not like slavery ending. And it was only Democrats in the South. There was not a single Republican that did this. They were treating the slaves like they were not freed yet. While they maybe didn't tie them down or chain them to a plantation, they made life hard for those people. They refused to respect their rights, their voting rights, their freedom of religion, the press, their right to bear arms. There were gun bans designed specifically to disarm or preemptively prevent the arming of the recently released slaves and their children. Specifically in some states, there were bans on cheap guns because we were talking about very poor people. They were released from slavery, and they were not released from slavery with a apology check or bag of cash, and they were very poor. So they could not buy the most expensive guns of the day. And if you ban cheap guns, you've effectively disarmed them. Alright, so with all this going on, the 14th Amendment was passed, which then made the rights enumerated in the Bill of Rights apply to the states and cities, all the governments, instead of only the federal government. And that was a great idea. So since then, the freedom of the religion and all of the freedoms, right, to keep and bear arms, the press, peaceably assemble, jury trial, all of those have been guaranteed to us by that constitutional amendment, making the power or jurisdiction of those rights be everywhere. The principle behind those rights is everywhere. Even when the Constitution didn't list those things or had not been ratified yet, a lot of the Bill of Rights are things that you're a really bad person and a tyrant if you don't want to respect those things for people. You are a bad person if you want to ban, punish, or harass somebody because they believe different things about God or pray differently. As long as they don't believe God wants them to conquer you and steal from you and rape you or rape your wife or your daughter, then it shouldn't matter how they pray and if they believe God wants them to eat a certain thing or not eat a certain thing. It should not affect things. So, thank you for watching. You have a good day and enjoy your freedom of religion, which I hope you have in the country where you live.